Hi, I'm John Long. This is Alice Clement and Aaron Kamens from Flinders University Paleontology Group.
This research was carried out on Taungurung country, and we've had support from the elders, and we pay our respects to the traditional landowners of this area in facilitating this research.
And Gillian Garby from La Trobe University helped with that too, because she's an archaeologist that works with the local First Nations people there, but she's also a paleontologist that studied fossil trackways from the area. So she was a great contribution to the paper as well.
Absolutely. One of the exciting parts about discoveries like this is that they're made often on undergraduate field trips. So we take our undergraduates out into the field, they get a chance to experience real paleontology, excavate fossils, and lead to fantastic discoveries like this.
My involvement with this amazing fossil find goes back almost 45 years, when I did my honours thesis and my PhD on the fossils of the Mansfield district. So I've had a long interest in this area, but it was only recently when we started running the third year paleo field trips that Aaron organised to the area to take the students to the fossil sites that we got a lot of the locals fired up. And two of those locals from Mansfield, John Easton and Craig Urey, went off one day searching for fossils and found this slab covered in trackways. This Mansfield area has produced lots of spectacular fossils over the years. In fact, more than 120 years ago, they found some of the most spectacular fossil fishes from this region in these kind of rocks. So we knew about the fishes and the sharks, but the holy grail that we were always looking for was the evidence of land animals or tetrapods, like early amphibians. And Professor Anne Warren from La Trobe University spent decades searching this whole area for such trackways, but never found them. So one day I'm just working away in my office here in the Flinders Paleo Lab area, and a big box arrived. And I got excited because I'd seen some photos that some locals from Mansfield had sent me of this slab they'd found. And at first I thought, oh, well, it's probably a tetrapod trackway of an early amphibian. And then when I opened the box and we pulled it out and we got the light on it, it was amazing how crystal clear they were, that you could see a number of trackways on the slab. I showed it to both Alice and Aaron, and we were over the moon. We knew we were onto something really big, but we didn't really know how big it was until the rest of the team had studied the material and done more scans and more analysis. And then we knew we had something really spectacular, like an early reptile trackway, probably the oldest one in the world. And that's exactly what we found. So at first we thought they were early tetrapod or amphibian trackways. We saw some of the sort of the hand-like impressions that you can see here quite clearly in the heat map images with 5 fingers. But then our colleagues working with us in Uppsala also identified a trackway right in the middle here that has hooked claws, like a reptile. And if you see from our image that's published in our paper, you can see that on this image here with the white arrows that there's hooked claws that come off each of the digits. So this signifies that instead of an amphibian, it was actually a reptile-like animal, an early amniote. And this is the group that today includes the reptiles, the mammals, the birds, and so on. So this really is the oldest evidence in the world of reptile-like animals walking around on land. And it pushes it back by 35 to 40 million years older than the previous records in the Northern Hemisphere. But more significantly, it also shows that this group probably originated in the giant southern supercontinent of Gondwana, which is right here in Australia. But in order to get this work published in Nature, there was a lot of other work that had to be done behind the scenes. So Alice, you did some of the scanning, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Yes, our research team was actively involved in working on and studying other fossil trackways, other fossil footprints, and we'd been scanning specimens from Museum Victoria and other sites. And it's very exciting these days that we have the technology to be able to capture footprints or trackways such as this digitally. This then creates computer models that we can analyse in detail and share with our colleagues more readily.
And in addition to Alice doing the original digital scanning of the trackway, we also brought Aaron on board because he's an expert in fossil trackways. He studied mammal trackways from all around Australia. So tell us what you did.
Well, one of the fantastic things about having a digital model of the trackways is that we can then start to produce things like this heat map. Now that allows us to see the details of the footprints much more clearly, and it also allows us to potentially identify tracks that we hadn't noticed. And in fact, we can see that there are 3 different trackways present on this slab, and we can start to see some of the detailed shapes that allow us to figure out which animals we might be looking at. And the other part of what we can do here is measure the footprints to compare them to prints that have been found elsewhere in the world and to look at how the animal moves.
It's interesting too that the environment in which these tracks were made, because when you look at the slab up close and you examine it under a microscope, you see it's covered in tiny little specks, which are actually fossil raindrops. So we know this was a terrestrially exposed, it was muddy bank of a river, and the animals were walking across, leaving really crystal clear trackways. And of course, we must pay acknowledgement to our wonderful team at Uppsala University, including Per Alberg and Grigor Nichvitsky, who are absolute experts at this kind of analysis and study of Devonian and Carboniferous trackways. So what did this early reptile-like creature look like? Well, it wasn't too dissimilar to this model here, which is of an early amphibian, except it would have had a slightly longer tail and it would have had claws on the fingers, and it would have been like a small stumpy goanna type of creature. So because I've been studying the fossils of this area since 1980 when I did my honours and then my PhD on these ancient fishes from these same rocks, we had a fair idea of how old they were. We know that these come from the Carboniferous period, which started about 359 million years ago. But this rock comes from the early or the beginning part of the Carboniferous. And it's very important to tie down the exact accurate age of this trackway because it's so significant in being the oldest evidence of reptiles in the world. So the way we did it was by comparing the different fish faunas that occur in these rocks with the same species and similar forms that occur in well-dated rocks from around the world. That gave us a time constraint of about 10 million years of the early Carboniferous. But we also knew there was a major mountain building event, an orogeny called the Canimblin orogeny, that truncated the deposition of these red beds in the Mansfield Basin. And that happened about 350 odd to 348 million years ago. So that gave us a really good constraint on the very upper and lower age range for this slab. And that tied it in beautifully so that the referees who evaluated this paper for Nature were happy that we had a very good firm date on these fossils.
Here at Flinders, we're one of the only labs in Australia that studies fossil footprints. We have a big focus on things like the megafauna, but some of the earliest trackways can tell us a lot of things too. And what we need to remember is that a skeleton can only tell us so much about what an animal could do, whereas a trackway actually records its behaviour and tells us how this animal was moving.
So we study rocks of this age, of the Carboniferous age, and slightly earlier rocks from the Devonian, to look at a very important transition, the fish tetrapod transition. We're really interested in trying to tease apart how the bodies and lifestyles of these animals changed as they moved from being fish, living in water, through becoming tetrapods and walking around on land. And so to do this, we're studying Devonian and Carboniferous rocks, looking for bones and skeletons, but also looking for trackways or evidence of fossil footprints. So researchers here at Flinders University are studying fossil footprints from various sites. And something that we're able to do these days is to be able to use modern scanning technology to be able to capture those footprints digitally.
And we've got spectacular material that we've been collecting from Gogo in the Kimberley, which is three-dimensional perfect skulls and skeletons. And Alice has been scanning these with synchrotrons and neutron beams so we can get wonderful resolution of the anatomy, of the inside of the skulls of these amazing fossils. And this provides lots of great material for student projects. In fact, we have a number of PhDs looking at these problems. We've had successful PhDs in the past that have gone on and got jobs and postdoctoral positions. And it's just a rich area of study. We're getting these big papers in Nature quite regularly out of this type of research, out of this lab. So it's really a great place to come and study paleontology.